Okay, so the first topic in mind is the buffer system, as I am intrigued in the question of what is the importance of buffer system in our body. Now, buffer systems are indeed highly crucial in maintaining homeostasis, the internal balance of the body, in response to the constant changes going on outside and within our body. So it is maintaining our body's balance in order for it to sustain life, since we don't just live for a single day, we must live for a full lifespan or for a full cycle. In order to maintain a full cycle, we must have internal balances that counters changes that is going on outside and within. Now, buffer systems are made or tailored specifically for changes in pH, since they buffer the pH. That's why the name buffer is derived. Now, we have multiple buffer systems in the body, one of which is the bicarbonate buffer system. We also have the phosphate buffer system and the protein buffer system, as far as I can recall. And one characteristics of such buffer system is that they have the capability to nullify both acid and base. Protein, for example, has a carboxyl group and an amino group, meaning it both have the positive and the negative charge functional groups. Now let's talk about the most famous or most talked about buffer system in the field of medicine and in the field of tertiary education, which is the bicarbonate buffer system. So how does it work? Well, as I exhale, we must keep in mind that most of the carbon dioxide exhaled is not the 100% of the carbon dioxide that has been in my lungs, since some of those carbon dioxide have been reuptake or participated in the bicarbonate buffer system. So how do they participate? How does um, carbon dioxide get converted into a buffer system that is usable to nullify the actions of acids and base? So for example, if the carbon dioxide have managed to enter the buffer system, it first needs to react with water to form carbonic acid. Afterwards, after forming carbonic acids, uh, it then proceeds to the formation of bicarbonate. Okay, so after the formation of bicarbonate, there are two products. After the formation of the carbonic acid, there are two products that can be derived. Again, bicarbonate and a hydrogen anion. So we must keep in mind that the buffer system is a reversible reaction, is a multiple reversible reaction, meaning if the buffer system has nothing to react to, or an acid or a base have not yet been introduced, the buffer system stays in a cycle of reversible reactions to sustain and to not overconsume the carbon dioxide that we are exhaling. Now, if a substance have been introduced, if an acid or a base have been introduced, uh, it then breaks the reversibility of that reaction. For that specific reactions, since we have multiple buffer reactions, it is not only a single reaction but multiple buffer reactions we have. Um, so if, say for example, the caffeine that I took earlier to wake my body up contains some form of acidity to it. Now, how does my body respond to such introduction of acid? Well, the buffer system reacts by uh, countering the acid by forming salts. So the formation of salt nullifies the effects of the hydrogens or hydrogen cations from influencing the pH balance. So, moving away from acids, let's look at NaOH or a base, for example. If a base was introduced into the body, the bicarbonate group would react to the hydrogen group, would react to the Na group, which would nullify its action, and the hydrogen group would then react with the OH group, forming water. So we have formed a salt and a water. So what does a salt do in a body? So it acts as electrolyte. So it is not just about defending the body from changes in pH, but actually it is a form of manufacturing our own salts. So buffer system can be considered as manufacturing salts, since to nullify an acid or a base, or to stop the acid or a base from harming our body, we must convert them into salts. Now, this is one of the most confusing, I may say confusing concepts in chemistry, as why does hydrogen affect pH as compared to the sodium, which is also positive? Uh, so why particularly hydrogen? Why not Na? Since Na is also positive, it also has a positive charge. Well, that's where the pH scale comes in, since our pH scale is specifically designed to measure the concentration of hydrogen ions, since it is the one that significantly impacts the pH or the acidity or basicity of a solution. Now, if we introduce a sodium, it doesn't increase nor decrease the concentration of hydrogen ions, since hydrogen ions are the ones that uh, are in equilibrium. So if we disrupt this equilibrium by adding concentration on one side of the equation, then the pH would be disrupted. But when we add different type of reaction, for example, Na plus, it doesn't add any quantity to the equilibrium reaction. It doesn't add to the concentration of hydrogen. Therefore, equilibrium or auto-ionization of water is not disrupted. So if it is not disrupted, the pH remains unscaled. Moving on to the importance of pH, buffer system. So we know that we introduce a lot of things in our body simply by breathing, exhaling, doing something, carrying some stuff. Everything adds to the pH of the body, one way or another. So the addition of changes in the pH is, should I say, uh, not as rapid as we may see, not as big as we may see, but small things stacks into bigger things. So, for example, I add uh, 10% of acidity in my body with increments for 5 days. So, in the span of 5 days, I would gain a lot of acidity in my body that my body could not resist it anymore, and the proteins and most of the compounds in my body would cease to react, since they are pH dependent. So most of our structure in the body are pH dependent, meaning they function well in this pH but not in other pH configurations. Now that's where the buffer system comes in, as it nullifies or it disrupts the small changes that is going on within our body. So, for example, I added 10 acidity to my body, and the buffer system reduces it by 10. So, even though the reduction and the addition is small, it is able to maintain the balance of the body, even though it is contributing at a small phase. Okay, that's all for question number 3. Moving on to the other question. So, moving on to the next question, which I find intriguing and very interesting and potentially a broad topic, if you may ask. It is still ongoing uh, in today's realm in advanced chemistry. Now, what is the difference between organic and inorganic substances? Now, you may have heard the word organic. So, what do you mean by organic? If we look at the stereotypical definition of organic, we often see it as something that is derived from nature or purely from nature. But I myself, I am derived from nature itself. I'm a product of nature. But I am not made entirely of organic compounds. I am a mixture of inorganic and organic compounds. Looking at the stereotypical definition of inorganic, um, we often see inorganic substance as metals and other compounds that are seemingly in a crystal form or something that is in a liquid form that uh, cannot be combined with organic substances or cannot be dissolved by organic substances. So both the definitions or both the stereotypical definitions that we find or we see in everyday lives or every day that we interact uh, in our life is somehow correct in some points. But delving into the chemistry of organic and inorganic substances, we see the difference in a much detailed picture. So the main difference between organic and inorganic substances is that organic substances contains carbon and inorganic substances does not contain carbon, most of them, or most of the time. I'm not saying always, but most of the time. It is, however, ironic that diamonds are made of entirely carbon but are inorganic themselves. So, if that's the case, if we label carbon as the main distinguishing factor for both organic and inorganic substances, then we must state that the labeling of carbon as the distinguishing factor between the two is just a matter of convenience and never always accurate or never always true. So, how do we secure or how do we increase this convenience of specifying or classifying organic and inorganic substances? So, in order for you to classify an organic substance, you must be able to see carbon bonded with hydrogen as the simplest form or one of the simplest form of organic substances include methane. Methane is a single carbon with 4 hydrogen attached to it. That is one of the most simplest organic substance that we have. And propane, butane, or other gases that we see, octane, are also organic substance themselves, even though they only contain carbon and hydrogen. Now, moving on to the inorganic substances, we have water, for example. Water is an inorganic substance but is crucial for our biological system. It acts as the medium. In fact, most of the mass that we have in our body, most of this mass is composed of water. So you may say that I am massive, but most of the mass that I have, or most of the mass that our population has, is really just uh, water. Well, the importance of water is to conduct the reactions that is demanded by the organic molecules for them to react. So there are also reactions that involves both organic and inorganic. For example, the mineralization of the bone. It utilizes both the organic and inorganic substance. So it is good that we classify organic and inorganic substances, but we can never separate the two when we are talking about biological systems. Okay, we can only classify them when we are studying the chemical nature of the chemicals themselves as being inorganic and organic, but we cannot separate them when we're talking about the chemical reactions in the body. As every chemical reactions in the body, or most of the chemical reactions in the body, includes both organic and inorganic. Now, moving on to the deeper context of such compounds, organic substances are typically or commonly non-polar. They are non-polar commonly, but not most of the time, not always. And water is or inorganic substances is typically seen as polar substances, as most of their chemical species are. They are mostly polar. Now, the difference between their polarity is what enables us to have the conclusion that like dissolves like. So meaning, if a glue that is organic have been stuck between my fingers, I would not use water to rinse it. Since it is organic, I must use an organic substance to dissolve it and eventually free my hands from being stuck, free my fingers, I'm sorry, for being stuck together. Now, organic and inorganic substances are complementary in nature, even at the structural basis of our body. For example, the nucleic acid, which contains sugar, nitrogenous base, and a phosphate group. Now, the phosphate group is inorganic in itself, but is incorporated into the structure of organic compounds, which is why we can never separate the two in biological systems. Now, looking at it at the chemistry level, um, the organic substances tends to form more complex structures as we are able to form sp2 hybridized sp3. Different tetrahedral configurations are exhibited by the organic substances, whereas the inorganic substances can only form a few bonds, or a few configurations that are not complex in itself, but is able to form massive structures such as metal, which is a lattice structure that is formed due to inorganic substances bonding together. Now, why did our body choose organic substances as the main structural or chemical composition of our body? Well, as I've stated earlier, organic compounds are much easier to be more complex, as their structure is designed to incorporate different structural configuration as compared to inorganic substances. Okay, so another difference between the two is that organic substances typically are the root of most of the chemical reactions that we have, whereas inorganic substances are just incorporated into such chemical reactions to make a product out of something. Now, the question is, if we combine organic and inorganic substances together, do we make organic or do we make inorganic? Well, let's go back to the basis that I have put earlier. does it have carbon and hydrogen? If the whole compound itself, for example, the DNA, which has phosphate, if the whole compound, looking at it as a whole, if we look at it as a whole, the only question in mind is, does it have carbon and hydrogen? If it does, then it is organic. It doesn't matter if it incorporates phosphate with it. That's all. So on to the final question that I would be addressing, which I find something that can be answered in the field of physics and chemistry and also biology for the most part. What is the importance of chemical reactions in living systems? I think it is not only limited to living systems. Chemical reactions is important for the universe itself, not only in living things but also for the entire universe itself. Okay? Without chemical reactions, we cannot derive something, we cannot derive complexity without chemical reactions. Okay? Now, it doesn't matter if we came from biogenesis or abiogenesis, we still need chemical reactions. Okay? So, talking about chemical reactions as the root of everything, existence and life, um, you can see it in a way that without chemical reaction, the existence of life would be impossible. Since biogenesis, both biogenesis and abiogenesis requires chemical reaction. It doesn't matter if we came from abiogenesis or biogenesis, both of which still requires chemical reactions. So, given that a chemical reaction is highly important or is the staple itself or the core of existence of life itself, what are the examples included in chemical reactions? Now let's move on from the beginning of life into maintaining life. Okay, since I'm done explaining that existence of life came from chemical reactions, let's move on to the concept or the ideology that chemical reactions is what maintains life and existence itself. Okay, now as a biological system, a system means you are constantly operating. Okay, that's what system means. Okay, a system is a combination of matter that is constantly operating. Now, what is the purpose of operating? Why are we operating? Why is our cell, why is our tissue, why are our organs operating at a certain manner? Well, it's because to achieve balance and to achieve balance, chemical reaction must take place. Okay, so we can also see chemical reaction in a perspective that our body is taking advantage of chemical reaction to sustain its existence. Okay, for an organism that requires chemical reaction, we must also use chemical reaction to maintain our existence. We must exploit the the capabilities of chemical reactions for life's existence. For example, uh, yeah, the simple concept of eating food. You know, you go on and digest, and then the food is broken down into monomers, from polymers to monomers. It is absorbed and distributed, all of which requires chemical reactions. Okay. Now the first one, uh, you eat the food, you break it down physically, meaning all the muscles that are involved in your digestive system uh, are mandated or required to contract and relax in a sequence manner. So, what causes a muscle to move? Well, it's a series of chemical reaction. The myosin that we have in our muscle is what activates its movement, meaning it is rooted from chemical reaction. Now, absorption. Absorption, on the other hand, also requires chemical reaction, as certain molecules must bind to specific transporters or specific vehicles for them to be transported in and out of the blood or circulatory system for it to be distributed and be metabolized. Now, speaking of metabolism, it's another form of chemical reaction that we need to undergo to for our body to use the food that we ate for cellular energy. Okay, so in that case, we would be using the Krebs cycle. Now, as you can see, four of which are seemingly sequenced and may seem to be uh, non-chemical in nature, are indeed chemical in nature. Okay, so uh, the manner that we see chemical reaction is different, highly different from the laboratory settings, because if we apply or integrate the concept of chemical reactions and delve into the biological functioning of life, we see that chemical reaction is present in every aspect, in every angle of living systems. Okay. Now, let me tap in further on why chemical reaction is the core of existence. Okay. Not only life itself, but in general. Okay. Holistic. Okay. So, chemical reaction is triggered. Okay. Chemical reaction is triggered because of the unpaired electrons in the valence shell of an atom. Meaning, an atom must react in order for it to achieve stability by fulfilling its stability requirement, one of which is the octet rule. Now, this also explains why some of the elements that we see in the periodic table, such as the xenon, which is a part of the noble gas, isn't that much of a reactive element at all, because it already achieved uh, its stable form. Its octet configuration have been already fulfilled. Now, chemical reaction is what allows for the transfer of energy. If we go back to the concept of thermodynamics, energy cannot be destroyed nor created. It can just be transferred from one form to another. Okay. Now that's a big concept that elaborates the concept of chemical reaction. Okay, so um, without chemical reaction, we won't be able to harness the energy in the food that we have. Okay, so the think of the food or the calories as a fuel. Okay, not just for the concept of taste, but for the concept of fuel. Okay, if we look at it at the concept of fuel, we can see that in order to harness the fuel, we must react to it. If we don't react to it, then we cannot harness it. Okay, since we cannot create our own energy, since that would break the law of thermodynamics, we must harness it. And in order to harness it at the chemical level, we must react to it at the chemical level. Hence the term chemical reaction. Okay. Now, another process of chemical reaction that is highly, should I say, highly important is the passing of genetic traits. Okay. The passing of genetic trait is also a chemical reaction. The changes in our phenotypes, as we see as we age, is also a product of chemical reaction, as it is governed by epigenetics mechanism, meaning the environment or the methylation of the uh, chromosomes are what is causing the changes of what we see in our phenotype. Now, chemical reaction is the root of life itself. Chemical reaction is the stem of life itself. Chemical reaction is the reason why we are alive. Chemical reaction is the reason why we can harness energy, and chemical reaction is also the reason why living things prevail, and why living things keep existing in this medium of universe. Okay, so chemical reaction is a universal phenomena that is both important in life and the universe itself.